You're live.
Good morning. We're here for our policy and strategy session, and we'll begin by calling the meeting to order and the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we live and work in Mi'kma'ki as a steward of the ancestral territory of the Mi'kma'ki people. We are all treaty people, and I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda in order of business.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Church, seconded by Councillor Bremner. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion's carried. So we're going to start with the presentation. I think this is a continuing discussion.
It is.
And Tara, or the whoever's heading it up.
Paul gonna start us here.
Paul, you have the floor, Paul.
Well, good morning. Glad to be back. This is the second session for this, so we definitely kind of narrowed down the scope of the report and options here based on what we heard at the last one. So I'll start on the slideshow. The first page kind of outlines the topics. I'll go through the feedback, QP reports, the village plan, the site plan and development permit options, and a few other things. So the first part here is a summary of what was discussed last time. So that was May 15th, 2025. Council showed some interest in treating lakes and watercourses the same. There's interest in removing wetlands from the setback, because the intent of the setbacks is to mitigate silt runoff into waterways, and wetlands are not sensitive to this type of issue, and there is provincial protections for wetlands. There's some interest in creating setback mapping that moves away from the reliance on the online provincial mapping. And the council was receptive to considering the option to add development permit to the general basic zone to improve the consistency of the planning documents. And the next page has a few more topics. Council was receptive to considering an option to remove the mapping component and rely on the owner in combination with the QP report to attest to the accuracy of the development in relation to the setback. And there was also discussion of site plan approval. There was some interest in this, however, it seemed like you were leaning towards a development permit approach. This would minimize landowner effort and to a certain extent remove some staff time and maybe avoid some potential issues that are hard to enforce. The last one here is interest in considering a tiered set of submission requirements depending on the proposal. So someone that's building right next to the lake versus someone that's building a house farther away but on the same property. So those were kind of a summary of what happened at the last meeting, and based on that, I've got a new set of options.
Councillor Connor, sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. But in preparation for today, I was actually wondering, we do get minutes, right? There are minutes from that official P&S meeting?
Yeah.
So I'll look for those sometime, because we do need to approve those.
That would probably be a question for the CAO or the clerk.
Right. So I guess it's a question for everybody. So all P&S meetings, we have minutes, right?
Yeah, we just,
No problem.
there was a mistake with the package for today.
Oh,
so
no worries.
we-
No, I looked because we would normally approve them. So I looked last week's package, which was a P&S, so they would have been, May 15th P&S would have been approved last week, right? But that's okay, they're coming.
we'll
The
get
minutes are coming. Great, thank you for that capture though, but I'm looking for the minutes, so thank you.
And then I'll just go through a few things that we've talked about already. I won't spend too much time in this qualified professional report, but basically someone looking to do this should hire a consultant that knows about siltation and drainage and a detailed survey sketch is another recommendation. It's called a location certificate, when the surveyor goes out and takes some points around the sensitive area and situates where the house,
Paul, I'm sorry.
Development is.
It's just my hearing a little bit. You wouldn't move your mic a little closer?
yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So yeah, qualified professional report, so, that would look at the geology, the grading of the slope, mitigation measures and such. And then the village plan exemption, so, the new village plan that just got adopted has, an exemption for watercourse, water bodies and wetland setback. And that's, a 50% reduction, with, qualified professional report.
Excuse me, Paul, sorry.
Yep.
Councilor Vino has a question?
Yeah, just relating to the detailed site sketch based on a survey or location certificate. My experience is location certificates are usually locating something that exists rather than, this sounds like a planning, sort of like a, so I guess it's important to understand what it is that the department would want in terms of a survey document, or would it have to be prepared by a surveyor, or what is it that they need to create the site sketch? Because usually when you're locating something, it's already there, you know, location certificate.
To show existing structures.
Yeah, that's typically how it would be done. So it would only work if you were sort of like on a property that already had pre-existing development. So.
So I can
maybe
chime in there.
Speak to that.
So under our current rules, we've actually asked for location certificates multiple times when the owner's like, I don't think the ordinary high water mark is where the province is showing it, and they're trying to get as close as they can for whatever their reason. So we've asked for location certificates, essentially surveyors going out on site. We say, please pick up the ordinary high water mark, which they do the true ordinary high water mark, which obviously does differ from the province stuff because it's all derived, right? So the province is not surveyed work, it is a derivation of like air photos and all that kind of stuff. So it's the best guess. So in addition to that, we say, please add the provincial topography on to show the difference. And we always give them the benefit of whatever is more beneficial for them. So if their ordinary high water mark, for example, actually is closer to where they want to put their structure than the provincial mapping, we still let them go to the provincial mapping because that's the starting point for us. But if it shows that actually their ordinary high water mark is further away, then we let them come closer.
Does this document have to be prepared by a NSLS, or can it be just like an environmental engineer that picks up the points with their total station, or like what's required? Do you think? What do you anticipate here?
Yeah, so typically we're looking for a special land surveyor, and what they're really out there surveying is that ordinary high water mark point. And then they tend to sketch on where the proposed structure is and the scale setback of what that's going to be. So if, for example, we had one where they wanted to do an addition to their house, and they felt they were within the 20 meters, they could make the 20 meters. And so they picked up, to Councillor Vina's point, they did pick up the exact location of the existing cottage, they did the exact location of where the ordinary high water mark was, as they saw it as a surveyor, and then they added in the proposed addition and what that setback would be. So we typically are always defaulting to surveyors.
Right, so is the site sketch, the thing you get, is it based on a survey, or is it the thing that you get actually have to be like validated by a surveyor when it's done?
Big difference.
So the site sketch that we receive originally, we don't require them to have a plan of survey with that, or to show that. What we're looking for, if we're looking for more accuracy, is we accept the location certificate.
Yeah, I guess because these is sort of an engineering sort of document when you create like a site plan. And so engineers are usually involved on that side of it, but oftentimes like surveyors are prepared based on some sort of survey information. So you have surveyors picking up points for an engineer or engineering company, and then it comes over and then they add all of the infrastructure because they know about that stuff. And then it kind of would usually go to planning. So I'm just wondering, is it going to be required that surveyors are really good at telling folks what exists, way better than what a plan is. That's usually done by engineers, and I just was wondering what you're gonna require,
Yeah, I
what you're
think-
proposing to require in terms of when the documents presented to you. Is it coming from a survey company, or is it coming from engineering? And what the quality of the information is, and for the existing, is it okay to have engineering survey, or does it have to be based on a legal survey? Like, it all matters, actually. Just curious.
I think our history has been having it based on a legal survey, that the points would have come from a previous survey that's been done. So I think that would be something that we would expect to continue unless there was direction not to. I don't think having an engineer mark up something that's been based off of a survey is a problem, once it's scaled. So I think the application would come from an engineering firm as long as.
So you may have two sheets, maybe sheet one would be existing with just bare land and water courses and whatever, and then there would be sheet two, which would
Potentially,
be
or-
like
yeah,
the
or the overlay,
proposal,
right.
which would show based
Yeah.
on that plan. Okay, that's fine.
Or if there's particular, desire around the table here to specify what we would accept or wouldn't accept, that's certainly.
I was just
open.
curious how it
Yeah.
would all unfold.
Keep it as simple as possible.
Well,
Did you want me to read the wording from the village plan one that we just? So this is in the policy, an application for development permit is accompanied by a detailed study, including a site sketch prepared by a qualified professional, confirming that adequate mitigation measures will be undertaken as a condition of the permit. Such mitigation measures will ensure the reduced setback effectively achieves the same result as the 20-meter setback. The study must also confirm that the area proposed for development is not subject to seasonal flooding. So it's not all that specific.
yeah, it doesn't really say much about how the information is gathered up. Yeah.
So when one of the matters for future decision was like having some kind of tiered requirements. So it almost sounds like maybe we need to be more specific than this.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that part of what we're trying to do is add some flexibility, because originally it was just like, we're gonna go by these mappings
Right.
that were flown by, like however they came up with it, saw an airplane went by and took some pictures, and they said, this is where the water courses are, or whatever, and we're like, that's probably not the most accurate. Sometimes we're, really disenfranchising people of their opportunity to develop their land, and so we don't wanna do that. So, but then, if we don't wanna use that, do we need to have it surveyed by a licensed surveyor, or is it okay to get, and like an environmental engineer that's really good with, doing that stuff, and they can go pick it up, and like, the description you based, it doesn't really talk about, it just says qualified person, which
Yeah.
is what most regulation does say. But I was just wondering what you had in mind. Sorry to belabor the point, just
So,
curious.
In administrative land use bylaw, in my opinion, why we default to qualified persons, because we're not experts in what those qualifications might be needed or what might come along in the future. So it leaves that door open for that adjustable, maybe somebody can only get a surveyor, or it costs less to do a surveyor than wetland delineator or something else, right? So that's why generally it's sort of left to somebody who feels they are qualified to say, yes, this is whatever it might be. And it also allows for site-specific requirements. So, and part of this will depend on what, if any, changes council would like to make. So if it's more about the drainage and making sure nothing's going into the water, then the surveyor might not be as critical, because it's really about designing the site, which to Councilor Vino's point is more of an engineering side of things.
I see, with the rise of technology, I see a lot of engineers out there all over the province that are getting pretty sophisticated and measuring tools for their work that they do on site. So they're going around with pretty high precision instruments for picking up their own, and then they'll use that data to do their own work.
Yep.
So it really comes down to question is what what you are willing to take. And it sounds like you're a bit non-specific about it, yeah, which is okay, It's fine if that's the answer, I'm fine with that, I just was curious what you had in mind, so.
Okay, continue, Paul.
Yeah, we were just touching on the village plan exemption. So, that's the 10 meters, down to 10 meters, with a qualified professional's report. None of the lakefront overlay or anything was changed in that village plan document. So we talked about site plan approval versus development permit. So that still is an option to do site plan, but from what we gathered from last meeting, it seemed like you were leaning towards the development permit option. But that's definitely still on the table. As we talked about, the site plan would have slightly more enforcement capabilities. And there's like a notice to neighbors that they have appeal rights. And I believe they can appeal if, how does the appeal work, Heather? Or-
So under a site plan, it is appealed just like a variance. And one of the things that is never valid for the reason of an appeal to be accepted is if it's a condition that's not required. So my example I always go to is if a site plan requires fencing for privacy and I accept something that's like a 4-foot chain link fence, that's a valid appeal for the neighbors. That gives me no privacy. But if there's never a requirement for a fence and they appeal because they want a fence, that can't happen. Also, the use itself, as we tend to write them in our side, because we don't do a density requirement, all that kind of stuff, is not an appealable option. So the fact that they may not like a reduction, when we, in the land use bylaw, if we say you can reduce if you do A, B, C, that you can't say no. I can't say no, and you guys couldn't say no, to say, oh, we can't do it because the neighbors don't like the fact that they're going to reduce. It's a matter of, did they miss something in the requirements?
So the landowners would have some appeal rights, but it's pretty narrow. We are checking with the municipal solicitor just to see exactly what type of enforcement abilities we have for development permits as well. The development officers wanted some clarification on that. I haven't heard back yet. And then there was the general basic zone and lakefront overlay matter. So it sounded at first like there was some interest in, you know, clearing this up, but a lot would have to go into like public consultation and things like that. So the option is still there to clear up the general basic zone and lakefront overlay a bit, but it sounded like you're leaning towards development permit.
Yeah. And just another note on that there will be a couple of other future discussions which will have the same element through it of an opportunity to clean up general basic and simplify the bylaws, being coastal protection regulations, which I'm just beginning to work on now, and may well end up with an overlay. So then you'd have 2 overlays where you might need permits or not, so it's going to create more confusion. But anyway, just a note to that, that there will be a few more discussions coming about general basic in the next few months.
So the next slide is about the watercourse mapping. So some of the options you'll find at the end have this a new mapping tool, I guess you could say, in the land use bylaw. So right now there's a lakefront overlay schedule at the end that shows which lakes the lakefront overlay applies to. So we could take that data from the 1 to 10,000 map and map it, and maybe have even just combine that with the lake, and we'd have one schedule for
Rivers and lakes.
exemptions for water features.
Councillor Connor.
Thank you. So using the terminology on the first slide, or second slide in, interest in treating lakes and water courses the same, so that applies with this slide, so it's all the lakefront overlay again, it's not just lakes, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Rivers.
that's
The idea
correct.
Rivers.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
merge-
we would
merge
map
Yeah,
the
perfect.
rivers
Just-
too.
I know, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, and I have a question. So if someone wants to build something and you access this mapping, and because I've dealt with this in Washington Shore, that the mapping wasn't accurate. So if someone wants to build something and wouldn't it be just as easy, I mean, this is not New York City, to drive to the site and say, you can, it doesn't, I would think that would be the easiest way. I don't know what, if,
Yeah.
how staff feels about that, but maybe I'm way off base here, but.
This might get a laugh, but you don't have any staff that are qualified to do that. Sure, I can tell you if a lake's there or not, but wetland delineation is a very specific field. And I've been on sites where wetland delineators have been, and they'll put flagging up, and
Okay.
you're like, that's wetland. Sometimes it's very hard to tell.
Okay, no, that's fine.
So,
yeah.
yeah, that's the,
Okay.
in certain cases, it would be very apparent, like either it is or it isn't, but
Yes.
it's the gray or the
Okay.
in-between where it can get really hard to
Thank
tell.
you.
So it's a good question, yeah.
Yeah,
And then with the general basic zone, you wouldn't necessarily be talking to the municipality because you don't think you need a permit.
Right, so it wouldn't even be on the radar.
Yeah.
Councillor Church.
Thank you. I'll just comment on the wetland, because in the summer, if we have a really dry summer, it may appear that there's no river there, and even the Gold River itself has dried up enough that you could walk across it, so it's really, depends on the type of
Yeah.
year and when you're going to look at that
Yeah.
site, so
Yeah,
a professional needs to be looking at it. Thank you.
I guess you could, in theory, like, have a consultant
right,
on call or something for,
to send them out to the site if we wanted to look at that.
Continue, Paul.
So yes, there's a desire from council to maybe refine some of the mapping that we use for these. The next slide is owner attestation. So this came up at the council meeting. We're keeping it in as an option, although it's not really recommended, but council could consider an option where we'd kind of pull back on the mapping and stuff and just rely on the owner to say, we're building far enough away. You could have, it would still have like a qualified professional signing off on it. We wouldn't just go with that, but, so there's some information on that option. And then, when I do bring this back for like official direction, just to move this along, we've kind of pulled out some of these options that we can bring back in once we know exactly a little bit better of where we're heading. So we talked about a tiered submission requirements. So would you need a location certificate if your building is far away from the lake, obviously? What the actual distance of the exemption may be. All land uses residential. Should development agreements and site plan approval be allowed this exemption? And then kind of clearing up is, should we be looking at decks and things like that? And then one that's not on here, that we'll have to get some direction on is if council wants to do more consultation or not, or just go with the standard public information meeting. But we can talk about that when I come back. But I thought it was important just to note, we're not necessarily clearing everything up here for now, but, so then, these are the 5 options that we kind of discussed afterwards with the CAO as well, and, so number 1 is, comprehensive amendments, so combine lakes and water courses, into one, remove the wetlands, create a new schedule for lakes and water courses, add an exemption, of course. And I guess I didn't take E out of there, but that's kind of one of the other,
Sorry, E was
we can
supposed to be
leave E out
removed,
of there,
okay.
yeah.
E would be removed
It's
from one.
part of D, basically. I was getting into the weeds a bit too much there, and I took it off the front page. And then option 2 is not be as comprehensive and just kind of bring in the same exemption we have for the village plan.
The simple one from the village, which is just half, you can go up to half with a QP report. And we, like Paul noted here, would have to do a similar exemption for the lakefront overlay too.
And then that begs the question, would you still want to consider the changing the mapping around and things like that?
But if you want the simplest, most straightforward, option 2 might be that in terms of changing the least in the existing regulations, but providing a relief option. Yeah, sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then
Go with option 1 and 2? Just
No. Yeah, what?
Maybe one needs a little more explanation, maybe?
Oh, for number 1? Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut Paul off in the middle here. I was just, so number 1 is, as you can see, is the recommended option, where we would, like it says, remove the wetlands, combine the water courses and the water bodies or the lakes. We would have a map that was available, so you could look at your map and say yes or no. And then, like Paul said, we would, in the next report that comes forward, we would bring in some options for the exemption itself in terms of how do you want that to work and how close do you want to be able to get. And then option 2 is, like I said, kind of if we want to leave things as they are but still allow some relief, that's kind of the simple way there. And then, yeah.
Councillor Church?
Thank you. I just have a comment about removing the wetlands. I realize it's the province that, I guess, regulates that. And I'm not so comfortable that that's the best solution. Department of Environment or whatever, pretty weak on these regulations. I'm just concerned that we would lose a wetland because they're not looking at it, it doesn't get looked at, and then all of a sudden it's, filled in. I have a
Yeah.
concern with that, because it has actually happened, I think, in our area. So, yeah, well, in our area, it actually has happened where a wetland has been filled in, and then they have to do whatever you want to call it, remediation of some kind.
And
I don't know if that's the best solution.
That would still, if we were to keep wetlands in, all we're enforcing around them is a setback from them.
Yeah.
If somebody messes with a wetland, we still don't have any jurisdiction there. That's still gonna be environment that goes in and does it. So it would mean potentially, if there was a development, let's say, on the edge of, and it went right into a wetland, we might be involved around the setback, the periphery piece, and then environment would come in for the actual piece, so.
Just my opinion, I think it's good to leave a setback for a wetland, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a logical reason that you wouldn't, but.
Yeah, so, and maybe, this was my mistake, I interrupted Paul here, but maybe we'll let him finish going through the options, but then also something to keep in mind too is whenever we bring something to you, you can pick and choose. If you wanna create option 6 by choosing, 1A and 2B and 3C, we can do that as well. Yeah.
Councillor Vino?
Well, if we want to go through the rest of the options first, that's fine. I was just responding to Councillor Church.
Sorry, could you speak up, sir? I'm sorry. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Maybe you need to turn up the gain on these microphones.
You need, thank you.
Do we want to allow our staff to continue, or should I respond?
Pardon me, I couldn't hear you, sorry.
Would you like them to respond, staff to continue, or did you want to respond?
No.
Councillor Vino to respond to Councillor Church?
Do you want
Anyways,
to
I was just
respond to
wondering, like,
Councillor
if-
Church? Yeah, you go
I mean, I
ahead.
don't have an issue.
I think staff.
Like, in terms of, as Garth rightly said, destruction or infilling of wetlands can take place whether or not they pull a permit to build a structure. In fact, if a setback were a problem and they weren't worried about environment, they would just fill the wetland before they made permit application. So having the setback really does nothing to protect wetlands, if that's the issue. In terms of protection against siltation, I'm not aware of really much issue, you know, regarding a wetland, if somebody built a house nearby, like, that's
Counselor, sorry,
more of an issue for water courses, so.
would you like to respond, Counselor Church?
No, well,
You're
I'll
on.
respond in the sense that I do know situations where someone has filled in a wetland and then it was obviously a wetland, but they filled it in and, you know, they put up their house and later they had to make some kind of remediation. I don't know what they did, but they certainly can't replace the wetland. It's already filled in, so.
Right, and I agree, but how would adding a setback in this policy
Changing that.
change that situation? It wouldn't.
Unless it would alert them to the fact that they, you know, need to be aware of there's a setback with the wetland. I don't know, I'm just saying that,
Like, people are gonna fill in wetland, they're gonna fill them in.
well,
And then they'll get policed by those who have jurisdiction over wetlands, I guess.
Okay. Are you,
I'm done, thank you.
you're done? Okay. Warden Weber?
Yeah, no, I just think that, getting involved in the wetlands is far more complex. I mean, one, the province has jurisdiction over it. Second, if we're trying to map wetlands, how are you gonna do that now? There's a lot. You know, there's a lot of them, and depending on the day of the week or whatever, I mean, you wouldn't know. And I just think getting too heavily involved in the wetland piece is too much. That's my view.
Counselor Connors, you just give me 1 second there. Go ahead, Counselor Connor.
Thank you. So, yeah, I guess I really hadn't gotten my head around it too much around the, and it relates to the Coastal Protection Act by the province or us and where we're at with this and the different municipal units. And when I was reading the CBC article this morning, when they were interviewing different municipal units, including Queens, again, it just kind of jumped out at me, and I should have known this, that if a property owner doesn't plan to build anything on their land right away, infill projects fall under the provincial jurisdiction. So Matt, even when we're looking at the coastal protection stuff that we're doing here, so that really bothered me. I mean, I probably knew that, but didn't think about it. So I guess, I mean, that's just wrong, right? I mean, if people know that they're gonna build, but yet this is what they're doing, and we have no jurisdiction, so yet we've been talking a good story here about, and we are gonna be looking at the coastal protection stuff, but yet, when it comes down to it, if people jump in and start infilling and think, well, you know what, this is for my kids when they're gonna build in 5 years, or 2 years, or 1 year, I don't even know what the timeline would be. It's still the province, correct? It's not even us. So when it comes to the coastal protection stuff, we really, unless they're planning on coming in and getting a permit, we're still not gonna be able to do anything.
Yeah, it's
So
an
it's
interest,
wrong.
it's an interesting one, and I mean, it is the case with just about everything, our jurisdiction is tied to a permit application.
Building.
Same with, you could clear cut your lot,
I
you know,
know.
we could have a thing in our land use bylaw about retaining trees, but if you cut them down before you come in,
Yes.
you're good
I
to go,
know.
so that is the case. On the coastal in particular, like I said, we're working on a package for you for some different options for
Yeah.
regulations. On the infill piece in particular, we've just adopted something in the village plan, which I hope will be somewhat successful, and potentially we could look to mirror on the municipal side as well.
Well, when you don't-
So we previously had tried to control infill through a development agreement process, which wasn't very successful, and it was often chasing after the fact. What we've attempted in the new village bylaw, yet to be, I guess, seen in action, is that any land that is infilled beyond the coast gets applied a zone that allows for virtually no uses. And so what we're trying to do is disincentivize anybody,
Yes.
rather than stop them, because we don't really have that jurisdiction. We're trying to make it so that if you fill it in, that land is gonna be virtually
You can't
useless. You
build-
could put a lawn chair there, but it doesn't count towards your yard setbacks. You can't build any houses or structures on it. So we'll see how that works. But I think, given our, legal authority, that's, at least for now, the best way we have to try, but it's a struggle, yeah.
Paul, continue?
Yeah, and then I guess another kind of side topic to that is in the province has the jurisdiction over the quality of lake water too, doesn't it?
Yeah. Through environment, yeah.
Environment, anyway. So we're on option 3 is basically option 1, except we would clear up the general basic permit. So we would look at amendments to require a permit for general basic. And then that would facilitate watercourses and lakes being combined.
All under one.
Then option 4 is the owner attestation, and then number 5 is just maintain the status quo.
Tara?
Yeah, I just want to try and add, just so it's a bit of a summary, I guess. So option 1, right now we have 3 different sort of sections of the land use bylaw that apply to lakes and watercourses. One is the overlay, the lakeside overlay, or lakefront overlay. One is the lake side zone,
Yeah.
and then one is the watercourse, water bodies, wetlands setback. And so right now, could you just give a summary of when, if you're in the general basic zone,
Yeah.
when would you require a development permit? What would that look like under option 1, and then what would it look like under option 3, maybe?
Right, okay, so, under option 1, we would have, so we would have this new map combined. So it would actually be, I guess, somewhat similar to how the lakefront overlay works today under option 1 in the general basic zone. So, if your property touched a portion of a river or a lake that was on the map, it would be the new Schedule B map, then you would require a development permit to ensure that you're meeting the setbacks.
And that Schedule B map would be remove the wetlands from.
Right, so it would just be the lakes, so it would be the lakes we have mapped today, plus the rivers would be added to it. And then it would just be, if your property touches that, you need a permit. If your property doesn't touch that, it doesn't need a permit. And that's
Okay.
the way it works today with the lakefront overlay.
Yeah.
If your property touches the lakefront overlay, you need a permit.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
Councillor Connor?
Thank you, so, thank you, because I know you're just at the start of this.
Yeah.
But jumping right down to D, which is add an exemption. And that's the next report or a report down the road where we'll be looking at options around what that exemption might mean or how it's defined.
Right.
Because going back to May 15th, when it kind of surprised me, right? When we came in that day and had the package and came in around the large properties that we have down in Aspetalgan, the Windsor Road,
Right.
Highway 12 in its entirety, really, that's all general basic. Well, I mean, it's not all general basic, but wherever general basic is. And I know I'm generalizing when I'm thinking of those 3 areas, but there are large property owners of hundreds and hundreds of acres that have a lake or the Gold River or a river on it. So that's where I'm keenly interested.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to make, that when we talk about exemption
Yeah.
there, the exemption you're speaking of is one. The other exemption is what the relief would be, because all of this is about getting closer to the lake or the river. So when, right, so so I think there's a couple of different kinds of exemptions that would need to be discussed there. To your point, should there be something to say if you were a particular distance away that you don't, it's not even relevant, but also the whole point of this, what we're looking at, is to allow people to get closer than 20 meters. So that's also what the exemption is, also how close you can get to the water feature. Yeah.
Thank you.
And,
No, sorry. I think Councillor Connors wanted to continue.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay, thank you. So, no, I'd forgotten that there was the relief around the 20 meters. And I know that during the municipal plan review exercise, it wasn't proposed originally for 20 meters, I don't think, but that's where we landed on it. And I was supportive of that and actually an advocate to increase that to 20 meters. And I know that some of the individuals that I spoke to over at the session that we had at Bonnie Lee, as well as in New Ross, spoke to me after and called me and emailed me. And I said, you have to think about it. You know, what makes sense? What do you see now? And then really, once we start thinking about 20 meters, it is quite a distance. It's a decent distance. It's not asking too much, the feedback that I got. So I'm okay with that 20 meters, actually. But the first part is really where I'm gonna really key in on, and it's not the relief of getting a lot closer to the lake. It's the fact that people are building a home next to Highway 14, but they have 300 acres in behind them that the lake is on. So
Yeah.
that's where I was really, thank you. So this has been really, I'm really glad for today's session.
Great, yeah. And then, I guess, just to finish, so that's kind of option one. And then it was option 3 was the other one we wanted to walk through there, Tara, yeah. So that would be, under option 3, we would do the same thing, combine the lakes and the rivers, take out the wetlands. Except in that case, we would make the change to the general basic zone so that development permits were required to make it the same as all of our other zones. And then we would be able to significantly simplify the document, make it a much more usable document. And again, I will stand by this, that I do not believe for a property that needs a building permit, approval from Department of Highways, approval from Nova Scotia Environment, plus potentially others, that asking for a piece of loose leaf with your building and your yard setbacks is too much to ask. So I suggest option 4. Personally, Paul is putting the recommendation together on this one. Three, I'm sorry, 3. And again, there is going to be most likely a coastal overlay, which is gonna duplicate this. And there is online permitting, which you'll hear about, and there's reasons that, having a very disjointed bylaw like we do because of that zone, it will continue to create, we'll have to continue to make it more complex in order to achieve what council is trying to do with that format. Yeah, so option 1 and 3 are quite similar, except in option 3, everything in the general basic requires a permit already, so we don't need to worry about the situation that Councillor Connors was saying. If you're way far from a lake, should you even have to be evaluated against it?
So, that's exactly. So in option 1 and in option 3, what we would end up with is keep the lake side zone.
Yes, available for communities.
Available for communities that want additional land use
request.
regulations around it. But then you would get rid of the overlay and the water course, water bodies, wetland setback.
Right.
Combine them into one that looks more like what the overlay looks
That's
like
right.
now.
It would be one map, and you could just go to the
Right.
bylaw
Okay.
and see whether or not it's a protected water course. So in either, I know I just made a pitch for simplifying general basic, but in either case, 1 and 3 both simplify things from where we are now, if that helps. Sorry, Paul, did you have?
Councillor Connors?
Thank you. So we're still talking 20 meters though.
Well, so once we get a direction here, the next report that comes back, because the whole reason we're here is because this fella is on Vaughan Lake moved his cottage and he's within the 20 meters and he's requesting council to give him a relief mechanism. That's the whole reason we brought this forward. These other issues just come up as part of the discussion. So the 20 meters is the starting point. We will have some form of options for you to go down to lesser than that, and that will be part of the next round of decisions.
And part of the public consultation. This is important.
Sure.
And when we talked about, Paul, you had mentioned around the options for, public consultation, if it's a public information meeting and so on, right? So public information meetings are great, public consultation meetings, but I think back on the amount of time, which was well worth it, I believe, the investment that we put in with the municipal plan review. So when we think of public information sessions, I'm thinking of 1 or more, regionally or in each district or whatever you want to call it. I'm not prepared to make big changes like this without consulting with the community. And everywhere. That's why when we did that, I went to all 12, because we didn't do the village plan review. So we did 2 meetings in every district besides the village, and I went to all 12. I thought it was important to hear from everybody. And this is important, that suggesting lakefront, or the combination lakefront overlay and watercourse, water body overlay, whatever we're gonna call it, reducing it from 20 or not, like, no, this is important stuff. And because somebody is in the lakefront overlay and built their cottage, that's one person out of 10,500 people or whatever our
Oh, agreed,
population
yeah,
is, right?
yeah. Council asked us to look, so that's
Oh,
why
no.
we're bringing
Oh,
it.
no,
And
and
the other-
thank you.
And the
Thank
other
you.
piece on the engagement, depending on how that discussion goes, is, like I said, in the next month or so, I will be coming forward with coastal. That will probably also need significant engagement. So there may or may not be a case to combine the two if we're doing those kind of extensive engagements. But yeah, when Paul brings back the next report, we'll have more to say about engagement options as well.
And I think, to Garth's point, because I'm familiar with the Western Shore case, and Sam brought this up, actually, which was, so this gentleman moved the camp, but when he did that, it triggered that he was within the lake, and he was gonna have to basically tear the camp, or whatever. But like Sam mentioned that, okay, if I have a camp on the lake, and the lake is gonna come through my door, and I put in for a permit because I need to move it back, or I'm gonna lose my camp, that triggers you within that zone, you gotta tear it down. And I think, which is a valid point, and absolutely we should address that, because it's gonna happen, obviously. And this is a unique situation, but, yeah. Yep. Okay, continue, sorry.
So I think we're
Are you done?
either ready to answer questions or maybe start to come to some sort of consensus on a direction.
Do we have any questions? Tina, Counselor Connor, just give me, there you go.
Thank you, yeah. Now, I don't know if it's a question, but before somebody starts to put a motion on the table around the options, and we all have a vote here, I get that.
Tina, sorry, there's no motions at this meeting.
Okay, excellent, very good, so direction. So that's just as crucial as, so I might end up voting against a direction, I guess. So, where I'm at, because I can do that for the
Yeah, you
minutes, because
can.
this is important to my community.
You can.
Option 1, when Paul came in, the staff report came in with the recommendation, and, with all due respect, because I respect you highly, Garth, all right? You had said one more piece or one more level of, is that development permit? I'm not there yet.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so again, depending on where we go with direction, I may end up on the record saying, not voting against it, but saying that's not where I am.
And just to be clear, so option 1E should be scratched, so that does
Oh,
not,
yeah, I got it.
that's not including the permit change in general basic, yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, you got what you need, Garth? Or are you looking?
No, we need
We need a number.
All right.
We need some correction.
And maybe I'll just, one final piece, on the general basic and the permit change, because, all of this is potential big change. That is a very big change. The other, and even if we get, and I know I keep saying, coastal overlay, and then you may have 2 overlays, it may be a decision that we live with that, and knowing that we have a plan review coming up in 2030.
Yes.
So even if we do end up with
No, but he said last time you're gonna start that well in advance.
yes,
of 2030.
if not next year, the year after, I think. And some of these things may be the basis, even if we have interim regulations, some of these may end up being, yeah, so I just wanted to make that note.
Yep, love it.
No decision's final with planning, we can always go back and tweak.
And that, I guess, if I may, I think one of the original options I had in the other, I don't know if it said it or not, but some of the jurisdictions you're allowed to move the building if you're not expanding it. So our, non-conforming or whatever is worded, you're allowed to rebuild and stuff, but you're not allowed to move it. Well, maybe non-conforming does it.
There's other things
but-
that.
But there's an option to do like a small exemption just for moving an existing building within the setback, if you are improving the setback and you're maintaining the same size of footprint.
Councillor Vino.
Yeah, to your point, I've been in jurisdictions that have these sorts of regulation, and they want to add a little doorstep or something like that, and then it becomes impossible to do even thoughtful things because, maybe there's a vertical component to, like, if in a coastal action or coastal protection kind of situation, and then there's a vertical component to the elevation above ordinary high water mark, for example, and their building pre-existed and it's built below that standard, and now they want to add a doorstep and they can't put a doorstep. And there's no mechanism. Now, at the same time, you want to allow for that because it makes sense. Okay, these folks should be able to have a doorstep, but on the other hand, you don't want them putting a wing on their house because that's not the idea either. So how do you feel your way through that? I'd be thoughtful enough to be able to add small little incremental things that make sense and makes people's lives better without jeopardizing the intent of what we're trying to do or try to add a back door. We have to turn our minds to that.
So Andre, would you say that you want to write an exemption into the policy, or?
We need some.
You need
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
thoughtful about how, if you're going to
Absolutely.
allow for thoughtful change or thoughtful exemptions, like you have to cap it at some, like, so that people can do those
Yeah.
doorstep kind of little things that they need, that just makes that, I'm tired of getting water down my back as I'm unlocking my door, I wanna put a little roof there.
Yeah.
Can't do it unless you do it illegally, it shouldn't have to come to that,
So can we get that?
Yeah, those will be in the exemptions that the options for exemptions that we bring forward, which could fit under really any of the options.
Okay.
All of the options that you see here will include
Allow exemptions.
further options on different kinds of exemptions you can give, so, yeah. But that's a great idea, and we have, I think, some examples of similar language, where basically if you're improving the situation.
That's right, you can't get a wheelchair ramp, you get old, you can't walk anymore, you don't
Yeah.
want steps, you can't put a wheelchair ramp in. That's an excellent example, even more pragmatic. So, yeah, I personally like option one. I think that was the intent of what we started this for, that's why but I'm not like really emotionally invested in it, so I could be talked out of it.
Councillor Connors.
Well, I was actually gonna move on making going forward in the next step. It's not a motion, I get that, but, and we're all still discussing it, but, my comfort level is option one. And, providing that direction to staff to move ahead with the, further diving into option one and bringing back that next report with further detail, especially around the exemptions and et cetera. And I want to add, recognizing the fact that 2030 will be here before we know it, and 2026 and 27, where we start doing,
Yep.
when you come in, with the planned action of how we get to 2030. So a year and a half to 2 years in rolling this out for the next review due by the 2030 is not far.
No.
Could you explain the difference between option one and option two? Is there much of a difference, or?
No,
Three
option
is
one
the
and
one
option two.
Option one and
Option one and option two. So Garth had said that sorry, I turned my mic. Garth had said that option two is sort of the fastest, simplest way. So I just want you to understand the difference between what we're proposing in one and what we're proposing in two.
Okay. Councillor Coolin.
Thank you. My recommendation is option one with the potential of adding on 3A. I believe that, the permit and development of the permit agreements for all general basics should be included in our new recommendation.
Yeah. Okay.
Option one with the to include potential of 3A. Thank you.
And that's essentially
That's option three.
three, yeah.
Yep.
They're
Councillor,
essentially the same except for that.
sorry?
That's the major difference, really, I guess, between one and three, yeah.
So if we pick three, that's,
No, we'll get into that. I guess we'll have to decide
Yeah.
the weight of the direction. That's right. There's no motion. There's no motions, but we'll have to decide of the seven, which direction, where we're putting our weight, right, in terms of providing that direction to staff, so.
Or if there was consensus to bring back both for a vote, we could do that.
That's
as well.
true.
Councillor Bremner.
Thank you, Deputy Warden, through you to our guest speakers. What does a development permit protect us on?
Protect us from or on.
What's the benefit of having it in the next step?
Okay, so in general, and Heather and Elaine, please feel free to jump in, but in general, it's the way that we administer our land use bylaw. So if you want a land use bylaw to be in effect, you need to have permits in effect. And if they're not, then virtually nothing is being administered in that area. It's also our primary mechanism for tracking. Now, of course, building has building permits as well. But in terms of number of units, types of, like all the information we've been submitting to various funding agencies for our housing, you know, a lot of that data comes out of our permit tracking. It ultimately, the whole reason we do planning is to try to reduce conflicts between different types of land use that may be nearby each other. That's, you know, again, the basic reason between yard setbacks is to create separation distances, and why a commercial use might have a larger setback than a residential use, and things like that. Any major points that you want to add?
Well, what I'm gonna say is, we have a municipal planning strategy. That is a community plan. It is not about how safe a building is built. My joke in the office is, I'll let you build it out of popsicle sticks, our building officials will have an issue with that. They are not concerned about community plan. They are literally concerned about, is this structure safe? They don't care, because it's not their mandate, it's not, they don't care, but it's not their mandate to be concerned of, is their buildings too close together? Could there be a land use conflict between neighbors? Is a commercial use okay beside this residential use? Is this too close to a lake? Is it too far away from a lake? That's all community engagement stuff. That's all what community wants. And that is why we do so much community engagement when we set these plans in place. Your land use bylaw is the main regulatory tool to achieve those goals out of your policy. To do that, we need a permit and application to review against the regulations. So today, in the general basic zone in particular, most housing doesn't require a development permit because it's 4 or less, right? So the bigger ones, we say yes because we want some extra criteria. We feel that that could have a bigger impact on your neighboring community, your neighboring properties. For the lakefront overlay zone, today, we require a development permit in the general basic zone when you build on a property that has that, to assure that you meet that setback, that separation. And it was, for everybody that was here, I think most of us were, when this went through, it was a lot of engagement and a lot of discussions. Councillor Connors is right, it originally started, I think, as a zone, here, correct me if I'm wrong, or like a 500-foot setback. And with community engagement and the senior planner at the time, it got settled at 20 meters, covers what the goal of it is. So without a development permit, you have no check and balance to confirm that that's not happening, because that is not something that is building services mandate. It's not something the building inspectors pick up when they're in the field. They don't look at that. And we have had multiple cases where this has come up. We just recently went through a development agreement for a mini home park that, because there was not permits required at the time when it started, building permits kept getting issued. That was all fine. But when we brought in the general basic zone many, many, many years ago, all of a sudden, development permits were required, but because it wasn't going through development services, we never knew about it.
Oh.
Right,
Now
so
we've had a
that's.
second example.
So they
We
get
have
an
no
occupancy.
problem.
So the
That's
development
not an
permits are
issue,
important.
Right,
Just-
we
just
don't
came
see
up.
it if it's not coming through our service, we only see it when
development
we're
permits are
reviewing. So that's part of one of the big pushes. I would also make, I agree with Garth, I think development permits should be in every,
Yes.
I do.
and there's a reason for that, because it is to assure that the policy is being enforced.
Yeah.
Also, it makes it simpler for those in the general basic zone. As we get more complicated, we've had multiple times where we've had to have somebody in mid-construction stop because something got missed. And so far, we've been lucky to be able to resolve it, but it impacts the owner, right? Because all of a sudden they were in the middle of construction, they had contractors, and they have to stop because we have to resolve something that's a development that should have gotten picked up, that we didn't see. So that's
Didn't
what
have
I
the
would say.
opportunity to see.
The purpose
Yeah.
is to protect the community in the goal of how they want to see their community grow.
I am much better educated now, and I feel 3 is my option choice for this discussion with that safeguard of the permit.
Councillor Connors.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm glad that we have minutes, and I'm glad that it's on record, because I'll be able to have these discussions in the entirety of the municipality of where everybody stood on this. I'm not I'm not going green light yet with the development permit because of the fact that we are doing public engagement within the next maximum 3 years. It could be a year and a half or 2 years, getting ready for that 2030 plan submission. So I'm just making notes, I've heard from people, because I actually initiated the discussion around the living on large parcels of land and the lake and the closeness to water and so on, and I think that we're just over-governing then, if you will, in terms of that, and I get that. That's in the past now, because we're not doing that. But, again, my discussions at the different community events and so on, so I know that, again, with our minutes and my notes, I'll be able to say where people have landed. So I'm still not good with the development permit, but I understand and respect everybody's comments, and I'm waiting to hear from everybody of where they've landed. Thank you.
Heather, I think you'd like a lot of clarity on this, because it would probably make your job a lot easier, right?
It does, but at the end of the day, that's not really the driving force. When I look at this, if you own a property in some of these areas, you don't know, right? Unless you are well versed of, there's a land use bylaw, I gotta go check, right? And some people are really good at that, but there are lots of people that, because building permits have been around since like 1987 or before, they're just used to it.
Yep.
Land use and land use permits is something relatively new. To Councilor Connor's point, it is new to our municipality, because most of it, we had that philosophy of, until they asked for it, we didn't require them to do that. So it is a different view of trying to be more proactive, is what I would say, in protecting people. Because when people invest into their homes or into businesses, that's a lot of money that they're coming into, like they're putting in. I always feel it's better to have a check at the front than trying to fix something after the fact.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because in the case of Mr. Swinnermer, he did the right thing. He applied for whatever to move, and I mean, he let the municipality know, or basically that he was moving the camp. He could have moved that camp and nobody would have knew the difference.
He actually moved it without any permits.
Oh, okay.
But after the fact,
Yes.
he has come forward when we discovered it.
He
and
did.
said, I would like to rectify.
Yeah,
it."
because
It's not rectified.
because I don't think he probably didn't think he needed a permit.
Exactly.
I mean, he was in the woods.
And that is another case there, is establish that across the board, like you need a building permit, you need a a development permit.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is one potential
Yeah.
advantage to that.
You already built it, so we thought I'd just move it.
Tara,
So if it sounds like maybe there's interest in one, maybe, or three, one of the two. And so as we go through this process, I'm thinking that, so if we require development permits in the general basic zone, you would want to probably bring back the general basic zone, go through the list of permitted uses, whether there's setbacks and all of that, so you would open up that general basic zone a little bit for discussion around, what the zone requirements are around that, right? Because right now we have very little zone requirements for most stuff in the general basic, is that correct?
Yes, and there'd be a number of ways, if that is where we landed, there'd be a number of ways to implement permits. I think we could just implement, but yes.
Right,
I
you'd
agree.
wanna look at whether you need setbacks and all of that kind of
Yep.
stuff, right?
Yep.
Councillor Church.
Thank you. Before I would recommend one, I'm leaning towards one. I'm not so sure that I agree with development permit for the general basic as yet. But maybe option one we captured under added exemption, maybe it could be added in there. But I not so sure I agree with the development permit as yet. I think it adds just one more layer to what people require.
Alan, you've got some general basic?
I have a lot of general basic and I'm sort of on the fence.
Yeah, it's a,
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I know it adds to the requirements for the people in the general basic, but I think it also makes it simpler for staff, so, and, yeah. So I think at some stage of the game, we're gonna end up with requiring the development permit, whether it's right off the bat or not.
That's right, we can drop it without too much.
Councillor Vino?
I think that, I think it's time for us to emerge from the caves and start rubbing sticks together. So, you know, for me, I think that having that, the barrier for preparing a development permit application is very low. Yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, anybody who doesn't want anybody ever telling them what to do for any reason, those people will continue to complain, but it's not a very onerous task for something that most people will do maybe once or twice in their lifetime. You know, fill out paper. It's not too bad. I could get behind that development permit requirement.
Councillor Coolin?
Why shouldn't everybody abide by the same, you know, design? I mean, if general basic is included or not to be excluded, I mean, shouldn't every person who's applying for any type of permit be responsible, like everybody else, to go through that process? Whether you're in general or not? Thank you.
Yeah,
You're three?
yeah.
Okay.
Haven't heard from
Any,
Bella?
pardon me?
Haven't heard from you.
Well, I'm not gonna live or die in either option. Because I'm not, you know, it affects the whole municipality, I understand, because there's general basic. And Alan has a lot of general basic in his area. I don't have a lot in mine.
329 does,
Pardon me?
329, you know. All
Yeah, so it's, so, you know, whatever the consensus is, I'm for it, yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So we will, Paul will work and bring back a request for direction, I guess, an official request for direction based on option 3 with more options to come within that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, with
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
You
yeah,
guys
and
clear?
just within that, because 1 and 3 are essentially the same except for the permit, we can
Yeah.
bring it back under 3, but then you can still vote on
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's right.
that or not.
Okay, great. Call for adjournment.
Second.
Motion, we don't need a motion. Anyway, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried, we're adjourned.